You are listening to the 5 a.m. podcast, and today is your day. Good morning, early risers, and welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast, where we start our day with meaningful conversations that inspire action. Now, today we have the privilege of speaking with Richard Battle, a fifth-generation Texan who embodies the American-do spirit that he writes about. Richard is an award-winning author of 12 books, including his latest release, Americans Who Made America 19th Century: Growth, Division, and Reunification. Now, with over 3 decades of experience as a public speaker on leadership, motivation, faith, sales, and volunteerism, the list is extensive for a reason. Richard brings invaluable wisdom to our conversation today. His extensive background includes serving as a corporate executive, nonprofit leader, and being appointed to advisory councils by former Texas Governor Rick Perry. Richard is also the master of ceremonies for the annual Texas State Prayer Breakfast with Governor Greg Abbott, and his professional accomplishments, well, they're extensive too. Richard's personal journey through significant challenges has shaped his perspective and resilience and his purpose. Now, let's dive into this conversation with a man who's on a mission to help people win life's race. Richard Battle, thank you so much for joining me today for 5 a.m. podcast.
Well, good morning, Michael. Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate that gracious and too kind introduction.
Oh, well, thank you. Your book, Americans Who Made America 19th Century, explores 40 influential figures from that era. What inspired you to focus on these particular individuals?
Well, and this is the second of a planned 4-book series.
Okay.
Last year, we had the 18th century volume. We're working on the 20th century volume now. And a couple of years ago, I was listening and I got sick and tired of our media, our politicians telling us what we couldn't do, telling us that we needed them, telling our children they couldn't have better lives than we had. And it just made me furious. And I got to thinking that what really made America was people with a can-do spirit. They saw a need, they took care of it, they had a dream, they chased it. And they, in their pursuit of those individual things, are what made the country. It wasn't the government. It wasn't politicians. It wasn't the media people. And so I wanted to highlight people and give out kind of what that essence was, so it would inspire others, and they would share that with their kids and grandkids to let them know that everything's possible if we have that positive attitude to start with and pursue it to the very end.
That's great. Now, you're a fifth-generation Texan, which in my books is something to be celebrated. You and I talked about how we have a farming lineage or ranching lineage in our backgrounds. How has your heritage influenced your perspective on leadership and this American-do spirit that you reference in your work?
Well, part of it is Texan, as you said, and part of it's individual from a family type situation, because my family, as well as I believe most families as I grew up, would have never wanted to take anything from the government. They didn't want anything to do with the government, the least possible. They wanted to be as independent as possible because they realized that the individual freedom that our founders gave us was special. And that if you got involved with the government, if you took things, every time you interacted, you were selling part of your freedom in order to get some of those temporary benefits. And so that's something that I think we're at risk at losing. And I hope that we can go back to that same perspective to where people will realize that individual freedom is what we've got to cherish and preserve.
Even though we may want to walk different paths in life and take different streams, we realize how critical it is to have that individual freedom. The one thing that always stood out to me as a young boy was the stories like the Alamo and Davy Crockett. And I think Mr. Bowie, James Bowie, was in there as well. Can you talk about maybe some of those historical figures that were transformative perhaps in your book, but also in your upbringing.
Well, yes, and I only have two characters out of the 40 from Texas because I didn't
Okay.
want people to say we were too prejudiced. But I include some people you would know, some people you want, but you will know more of the individuals than your children or grandchildren would.
Okay.
Because I want people to see it took everyone to build the country. It takes every one of us to continue to make it prosper. And so one of my favorites in this is Sam Houston, because he was one of my favorite leaders. But there's a part of this that I didn't know until a couple of years ago that I think is so inspirational, because we never know when we may say something or encourage someone and help them, their children and grandchildren. And Sam Houston, he was the George Washington of Texas, if you will. He was the commander in chief of the Army, the first and third president of the Republic, governor. I mean, he was the leader in Texas. But when he was 19 years old, he was going off with Andrew Jackson to fight in the War of 1812. And his mother on the back porch was bidding him goodbye. And she told him, if you're courageous, you'll always be welcome here. But if you show to be a coward, never darken my door again. And then she did something very unique. She gave him a small gold ring. Inside of it, where only he could see it, was the one word stamped, honor. And I envision him through his life. He wore that ring every day the rest of his life, more than 50 years, died with it on. It's at the museum at the San Jacinto Memorial outside of Houston now. And I can just envision him going through difficult decisions and turning that ring, and all he's thinking about, honor, honor, honor. His mother died in 1831, so she never saw the impact of that gift. And so when I speak to groups, I tell them I wish my parents would have given me an honor ring.
Yeah.
And I highly suggest you consider giving one to your children or grandchildren as well. And it's just an example of, she didn't know how she even affects Texas and America today, 200 years later, but she did. And we never know what impact we may have on people beyond our lifetimes.
That's right. Well, we'll have to get into honor. I often think of there was a phrase that I heard once that a man never plants a tree for himself. He plants it for the next 4 generations. So I would love to talk about honor, and that we could use Sam Houston, or maybe you have another example of understanding that principle of honoring others in the course of our life or on the mission that we're on.
Well, I think Sam Houston's a great example. I love him from a leadership standpoint. His number one example to me, and the Texas Declaration of Independence, they adopted it on his birthday. That's how much reverence they had for him. After the Alamo fell, Sam Houston was going to pursue the Texas Army, and Sam Houston made a retreat or a strategic withdrawal going east toward present day Houston, and Santa Anna's army chased them. Well, not only was the army there, but there were women and children, elderly, all leaving to try to escape Santa Anna, because during the War of Independence, there were no prisoners taken. Anyone taken captive was executed. And so the men of the army wanted to turn and fight. They lost brothers and parents, etc. They wanted to turn and fight. Houston knew they had one chance. And so they ran for 6 weeks. Every day, those people were begging him to turn and fight. And only the credit that he'd built up and stored in his leadership allowed him to control that mob from turning around and losing. But then on April 21st, 1836, they did turn, defeated Santa Anna, and won independence. And that, to me, is one of the most acknowledged pieces of leadership I've ever seen.
Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. Turn everyday teaching moments into a valuable lesson about long-term wealth preservation. Gold prices have historically risen during economic uncertainty. The time is now. Visit myinstantgold.com. So I was thinking too, when you were talking about, can you just imagine being that I would have been like maybe a page or reporter for Andrew Jackson and for Sam Houston, the conversations that that must have been spoken of in the concepts and things, probably would be one for the record books for sure.
Well, absolutely. And I'll give an example out of the 18th century volume.
Okay.
There's a character named Billy Lee, and I'd never heard of Billy Lee, but he was attached to George Washington. He was enslaved to George Washington, but he was his aide, his valet, etc. And as I tell people, the higher up you go in leadership, the fewer people you can talk to and try to bounce ideas off of, get encouragement, etc. And I think Billy Lee was the guy that was the George Washington whisperer, if you will.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why in just a second. But
Okay.
I envision him like the character in the movie Patton. If you remember, Patton had a sergeant named George who was his valet. And when they were in private, George would encourage him. He would give him feedback and things of this nature. And only George knew, and General Patton knew what they discussed. Well, I envision Billy Lee doing the same thing, and there's no telling what his encouragement gave to George Washington. Now, there's three reasons I think that he did that. One was he was the only enslaved person that Washington mentioned in his will, the only one. He was allowed to live at Mount Vernon the rest of his life, and he is buried at Mount Vernon as well. And so he received much different treatment than any of the other people and had much greater respect from Washington, which tells me that he was valuable to Washington.
Yeah.
And yet
Wow.
nobody knows about him.
Fascinating. It is fascinating in history to think of those lesser known names and the influence and impact that they actually had on their own sphere of influence, that the the good Lord above decided to give them and place them in these certain environments. So in your book, the four-letter word that that builds character, which was a finalist in USA Today's best books. You focus on what I assume is work. How has your understanding of work's value evolved through your career?
Well, what was interesting about that volume, and I had not anticipated writing it, and I went
Okay.
to a development course, and the homework was what was one lesson you learned from your first job.
Wow.
And when I went home that night, I started thinking of all these different things I learned, and I made a list on one page of 14 of them and put it aside because I was publicizing a book about the loss of my son. And then 4 years later wrote it. But they were 14 lessons I learned as an 11-year-old paper boy, and they were lifelong lessons because I could look back years later and see these principles that I had learned, and I had learned them at 11 years old, but I didn't realize it. And so when we see young people today that say, I don't want to flip burgers at McDonald's, which I've done worse jobs than that, uh, there's lessons for life to be learned from all kinds of legitimate work, whether
Yes.
we realize it at the time or not. But those lessons are valuable and will contribute to our lifelong success.
Yes, absolutely. The bigger and better the house, the bigger and better the foundation, and more robust. And so we need those. And I was thinking as you were talking about my paper route, and I had a job before that of cleaning out the pig barn at the farm about a mile down the road. Fortunately, we didn't have to walk there in the morning. We got a ride there and back. But those formative experiences are so valuable. And it's far beyond the minimum wage that we might pay people or that we were paid ourselves. I mean, you didn't even get a minimum wage for delivering papers. It was like paid for quantity and production. Uh, I wanted to ask you, you've spoken about overcoming significant personal challenges, including surviving cancer and, of course, unfortunately, the loss of your son. How did these profound experiences maybe reshape your approach to leadership and your message to others?
Well, a couple of ways that I would like to share, and you're right. I mean, adversity reveals character, but it gives us a chance to learn and become better people as well. And so, probably that one of the lessons I learned that I think would help others in adversity. The first question most people ask is, "Why me?"
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, my faith helped me. In my opinion, why me only looks in the past. And
Wow.
my God is not in the past. He's in the present and the future. And if we get hung up in the past and not ever get out of that why me question, we can't grow and we cannot help others. So I believe in adversity. The question to ask is, what now? What lesson am I supposed to learn from this adversity so that I can have a better life and help more people going forward? And I believe He is there to help me along that path. And when I realized that, it helped me to put grief and adversity in perspective and try to turn it into positives, because I found out that when I hurt the most, it was because I was self focused. And when I focused on others, I could put my hurt aside while I tried to help others that might be suffering.
Right. And so that suffering and those obstacles, they're a little misunderstood as to the value. I had a friend, and her dad would say, if you're not going to ask why me when something good happens, you don't get to ask why me when something bad happens. And that kind of stuck with me of, boy, that's a pretty good mindset.
Yeah.
And now you've written extensively about American history and values. What do you believe maybe are the most misunderstood aspects of American, maybe the leadership tradition, or the today's leaders that we see around us, that they should actually consider?
Well, I think what's missing mostly today, and that's another reason why I'm working on this project, is our founders gave us this unique gift of economic liberty and political freedom. And the combination of that set people free to pursue their dreams and their individual dreams. So we were given individual rights, and we were given a republic, a representative government. Today, we hear our leaders and media talk about democracy. We're not a democracy. A democracy is one step above mob rule. They want to emphasize collective benefits based on a group: men, women, black, white, whatever group they want to put people in. They want everybody to fit in a group whole versus being treated as individuals. And that's what I want to make sure to go back and emphasize. Aristotle said, republics decline into democracies. Democracies degenerate into despotism. And that's the path. When we lose our individual rights and go into groups, that also takes us away from God given rights into man given rights. Any rights that man can give, man can take away. God given rights are eternal.
Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. That is a powerful reminder of, as so often we hear things, either it's in sitcoms or movies or on social media, of people referring to the United States of America as a democracy. And my wife will tell you more often than not, I say, no, it's a republic. And there's a big distinction there. And it really is the power of that individual. And then you talk about leadership, but I wanted to ask about your book, Navigating Life's Journey, the Common Sense in Uncommon Times. And it seems to me this has a connectedness to what we're talking about in terms of republicanism versus, and I'm not talking about the party, the
Yes,
political system
yes.
and the democracy. Um, this book won silver in Reader Review self-help category. What prompted you to write this book, and what uncommon wisdom do you think is most needed in the environment today?
Well, and it's a series of essays that can be
Okay.
read individually in any sequence. And it's basically looking at the lives we have and how we can maximize our lives. Because I believe as long as we have breath, there's an opportunity for us to live a better life and an opportunity to help others. And so it's a random grouping of essays based on thoughts and suggestions of ideas for people as well. Because I think one of the things that happens, and it happened to me when I was in the corporate world, we get so busy that we become more focused on a shorter period of time in front of us than we do looking down the road at the end of our lives or beyond, and what we may be able to do to impact those things. And so I want people to sit and think and read this and try to figure out how I can help them better where they're at and where they're going.
Hmm. Yes, those are good words. And I was just thinking in terms of leadership and individuality, um, it's just so valuable to think back to those that have been before us. And of course, it's been said the rearview mirror is a lot smaller than the windshield. And I guess we can remember the past and the things we've been through, but also moving forward and seeing what's ahead. And I wanted to ask you about your book, Made in America by Americans, Not Americans. You make a distinction that seems fundamental to your philosophy. Could you elaborate on how it applies to addressing today's challenges?
Well, and that ended up being the precursor for the latest two books. And again,
Okay.
it's a series of essays, but it's a how to. It's an essay with the thoughts, but then there are specific steps people can implement to help
Mm,
themselves, families, business, etc.
yeah.
From that American do spirit, because again, I think that we're being discouraged. Media, politicians, other people discourage us. Everyone needs encouragement, and they need not only the encouragement and the inspiration,
Hmm.
but the ideas that can help them as well. And so, my belief is Oliver Wendell Holmes, Supreme Court Justice, said, "A mind stretched by a new idea can never return to its original dimension." We never know when that one idea that will change our lives and those we influence will happen or how it will happen. So if you can pick up a book and read it and get one great idea out of it, it is more than paid for itself in your time or any investment.
Hmm. Yes. That sounds very appealing and engaging, of course. But now your mission statement is to share ideas and experiences with the desire to help people win life's race. What does winning life's race mean to you, and how has that definition evolved through your career?
Well, and it's something that I've lived my whole life. But as we moved into this writing and speaking part of my
Hmm.
career, if you will,
Yeah.
it's become much more into focus. And again, it's either through interviews like this, through the books, other different media, that anything I do will be positive. It will be as beneficial 50 years from today as it is today, and it will be there to benefit the reader or consumer that's listening or reading what I'm doing, because I'm trying to share things that will be helpful based on either my life experiences or experiences that I've learned about from others.
Hmm. Now, as someone, I live in oil and farm ranching country as well as yourself, as someone that's lived through those economic boom bust cycles. Uh, and for you in Texas, there was a real estate collapse in the 80s that you've mentioned and how it affected you personally. What advice would you give to leaders or maybe those entrepreneurs that are side hustling and want to be main hustling and they're trying to navigate today's economic uncertainty?
Well, I think that's a great question, and we could spend a whole segment
Yeah, we
on
could.
that. But I mean, one of the first things to me is it's not about the money. The money is a way to keep score, and I have a story I could tell about that. But
Yeah.
it's about the relationships, and if you've been around longer, like I have now, you realize that people you dealt with many years ago may come back, and you may have to deal with them again in the future. And so, building those relationships. And as Zig Ziglar said, you can get anything you want to out of life if you help enough other people get what they want.
That's
And
right.
so, if you're a servant leader, if you're trying to help other people attain their goals and dreams, then they can contribute to helping you attain a
Yes.
greater sphere of influence as well, which is more positive and helping people win life's race and more
Mhm.
people. That's my goal, is to reach out to as many people as possible.
Yes. And there is that scripture verse that I talk a lot about here on 5 a.m. podcast, which is, "He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed."
Absolutely.
And so, to our listeners and viewers, we have a comment section, and we'd love to hear your feedback on what Richard and I have been talking about. He's got a lot of great books. Richard, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, my website is richardbattle.com. All
Okay.
books there are signed.
Now, looking back at these books that you've published and your extensive speaking career, what do you hope will be your most enduring contribution to conversations on leadership and personal development?
Wow, what a great question that is. And again, the best leadership, in my opinion, is by example
Hmm.
and leading from the front. And I think that our history over the thousands of years has proven that. And there's been a movement by some groups in the last few years to try to say that you can lead from behind, which to
Mhm.
me is preposterous. And
Yes.
so trying to share with people servant leadership, the opportunity to impact, the benefits of having those relationships, that if you work and lead properly, setting a vision, bringing on and building a team, uh, giving people the attaboys for a job well
Right.
done, correcting in private. I mean, a lot of these things you'll see in leadership. And the better that you do those things, the more impact and success you'll have, whether it's your family, personal life,
Mhm.
little league team.
That's great. I just I often talk about how there's a chapter in the book of Proverbs for every day of the month, and it's a valuable leadership tool and just mindset tool. And so I wanted to share with you Proverbs 28 and get your feedback on it. A faithful man will abound with blessings, but one who is eager to get rich will not go unpunished.
Well, I think those are excellent.
Yeah.
And I believe that each of us will impact 100 years from today and beyond. When I was a boy, my mother would tell me stories about my great great grandmother serving milk and cookies to my great grandmother and her friends on this little table. And my great grandmother lived until I was 9, so I had a relationship with her. And after my mother passed, I found a picture of my great grandmother as a teenager. And I found this little autograph book that, at those days, when friends came over, they'd sign an autograph book. And the autographs were 1884.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, I started thinking about it, that my great great grandmother was an influencer before that term was ever thought about, because when
Wow.
she served milk and cookies, she wasn't just giving milk and cookies, she was dispensing life lessons of those kids. And so then my great grandmother did it to my grandmother, who did it to my mother, who did it to me, who I did it to my daughter. And
Yeah.
so over that table, which is a physical manifestation, 6 generations of life lessons have been taught. And I
Wow.
tell people when I speak, every one of you have had that same experience, whether you have a table or not. And so my great great
Mhm.
grandmother still influences me, even though I never knew her, which means that what I'm doing with my daughter today will influence her children and grandchildren 100 years from now.
Wow. Powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Richard, I got to say a hearty thank you for being with me today on 5 a.m. podcast.
It's my pleasure, and God bless America.
Amen. Thank you for that. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. What a conversation. Please head over to Richard's website, which is an easy one, richardbattle.com. And we know that we're all about uplifting, encouraging, being purveyors of hope. So thank you for watching. I'm Michael Klassen. Make sure to seize your day, enjoy those sunrises and sunsets and all those adventures in between. God bless. Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. What are you teaching your children about protecting their future? While inflation erodes savings accounts and market volatility threatens traditional investments, families need a timeless solution that stands the test of time. Introducing MyInstantGold.com, the revolutionary sound money wallet that makes gold ownership accessible to everyone. For as little as $1, you and your children can start building a portfolio of real physical gold. Don't just tell your children about financial responsibility, show them with MyInstantGold.com.